fleets of drivers that work for FedEx or the post office or any number of companies are going to be replaced by those new technologies. And so the bottom line, no matter what the president does or doesn't do, there are these meta trends that are coming, and they're going to force a conversation, I believe, about how our current system of capitalism works. At a time when the robots are taking more people's jobs, are we going to have a robot tax? Are we going to guarantee a basic income for all Americans? This is something that's been tried in Switzerland and Canada. Are we going to change the tax code? Are we going to re-educate people fast enough to get through this period of disruption? These are really the big questions that are on the table. And I think the good news is that there are some models, there are some solutions out there, and in part, corporations themselves are starting to really get on the bandwagon in lieu of, with the political gridlock we've seen and with the contentiousness that we still see in government. I'm seeing a lot of great solutions coming from business. IBM, for example, big tech company, has come up with a brand new high school. It's a 6-year high school. Kids graduate with an associate's degree. IBM trains them in a certain curriculum, and they guarantee them jobs when they graduate. This is being rolled out in New York and Chicago and many other states. There are great ideas coming out of communities like this one, and I think that kind of localism is really where the action is going to be economically in the future. So just to go back to this sense of where we're going and millennials and boomers and this loss of faith in the capitalist system, I think that we're going to have to move from a system in which shareholders and what is best for shareholders of companies is the end-all and be-all, and move to more of a stakeholder system in which you have entire communities that are dedicated to creating growth locally. And so I'll just end by sharing a story of one of those communities, which is something that maybe people here can relate to in Jacksonville. I spent a lot of time recently in Columbus, Ohio. And Columbus is a real bellwether state and community. A lot of people look to it for political cues and economic cues. After the financial crisis, Columbus was hit really, really hard. They lost quite a few jobs in the manufacturing sector. The public budgets were cut, public services were cut, education was suffering. And the mayor, who was at that time a Democratic mayor, got to the point where he was cutting so much that there really wasn't much left to cut in the budget. All the back office stuff had been cut. And so he said, how can we really move forward here? And he decided to go to the city business leaders, most of whom were Republicans, and say, we're going to have to do a tax hike. And of course, nobody wants to hear about a tax hike. But he said, if you help me do this, if we can come together and do a tax hike, I will create a council, and all of the Republican city fathers can sit on this council and help decide how that money gets used. And so he was able to do that. And they created this pot of money. And Columbus used it to renovate its downtown, to create training centers that would actually link up educators, businesses and schools began talking to one another about what kind of talent was actually needed to fuel industry in the area. You had companies that would actually start putting together vertically integrated campuses where manufacturing and R&D and design would all be done on the same campus, which, even though it's more expensive because American labor is more expensive than Chinese labor or Mexican labor, it had the advantage of being able to get products to market faster. And so companies like The Limited, for example, have prospered doing this kind of local-nomics. And just as a mark of success, over the last few years, Columbus has gone from being basically a dying Rust Belt town to creating half of all the new jobs in Ohio since the financial crisis. So this is an example of a positive change at a local level of a sort that I think that we need to and are going to see more of in order to get beyond this lack of trust in the capitalist system and to get us to hopefully a new era where we can start seeing some real Main Street growth and not just market growth.